Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel for a conversation about the hatchet. One of the most universal tools that there is and one of the most important. If you're going to be doing any kind of bushcrafting or woodworking or camp crafting, you're going to want this in your collection. If you're going to do any sort of serious camping, longer term trips where you're going to do a lot of firewood processing, then this is your most important tool. And if you think you need a survival knife for some situation, what you actually need is a hatchet, not a knife. Right? So it's just a great tool with so many uses and purposes. And because it's such a great tool with so many uses and purposes, and because it's such an ancient tool and has so much history, there's just a dizzying array of these things that are available on the market, or available to be custom made if you know a blacksmith who will work with you. So I want to take a little time today to look at a couple of examples. Now, I don't have a universal collection of hatchets. I have a few, and I have enough that we can talk about why they all are the way they are. And I want to talk to you about these on that basis. Why these are the way they are. Why they have the features they have, the shapes that they have. So that you can then make the best informed decisions on what you want. Because I might not have your quintessential best hatchet. Okay? I'm not going to do this from a brand loyalty perspective. I'm not going to do this from this is the one you must buy for perspective. I want to talk about why they are what they are, so that you can make those decisions for yourself. Okay. So we'll start with this one. This is an Olympia. It doesn't have a particular model stamped on it, but it's at least very similar to the Voyager hatchet, which is kind of the quintessential scouting hatchet, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts of America. So this is a 1¼ pound head, which is the lower half of weights for hatchets. Most of your hatchets are going to come in from like 0.9 pound to up to 1.75 pounds. Okay, some will hit 2 pounds. Once we get over 2 pounds, we're talking more about a boy's axe, a pack axe, or a canoe axe. You'll get those terms attached to it. Okay, we'll talk about those a little bit here in general. So 1 to 1¼ pound is a really good size for around ½ a kilogram. Really good size for a young person or a smaller bodied adult. The weight of your hatchet is the very first thing to think about before you think about anything else, right? Because if your hatchet is too heavy and you're just exhausting yourself picking it up, right, because this is a weight that you're going to be doing hundreds of reps with in a very short period of time. Okay? So if you're exhausting yourself picking it up and doing reps with your hatchet, you're going to get tired, fatigued, you're going to death grip it to compensate for your hand fatigue, you're going to get sloppy, and then you're going to destroy your project or hurt yourself. Okay? We don't want to do either of those two things. We don't want to destroy your project, and we especially don't want to hurt yourself, especially if you're out in the middle of the woods somewhere. Because even a relatively, what is under optimum conditions, a relatively short walk back to home can be a very dangerous situation if you're bleeding out the whole time that you're doing it. So it's no accident that the quintessential scouting axe is 1¼ pound, right? Because that's a really good size for a large-bodied young person or a smaller-framed adult, right? It's just kind of a perfect weight for that. It's not so heavy that, a 150 pound person is going to exhaust themselves too quickly in its use. But it's heavy enough that it can get a good blow on your work, okay? So as we go up in size, you tire faster, but when you're using a hatchet, you pick it up, and then it falls on its own weight with kind of a bit of a loose hand. Right? Do you see how when I'm using this, I'm allowing it to work, okay? I'm allowing it to work. I'm not death gripping it, right? So when you come down on your piece, you're going to kind of come down, and it's loose in the hand, and it's falling mostly under its own weight. Okay? So the more weight is in its own weight, the heavier blow it's going to strike and the deeper it's going to cut into your work. Okay? So that's an important thing to consider. The heaviest hatchet that you can use without fatiguing will do the most work for you. However, if you cross that line and you fatigue yourself too quickly with your hatchet, it's self-defeating. You fatigue yourself and you have to quit too early and you don't get any work done at all. Right? So you have to be very honest with yourself about this. Now, this is very much a diminished felling axe in pattern. It's just a basic, roughly rectangular, slight flare to the tips, but approximately rectangular piece. Okay, diminished felling axe. The hatchet I recently handled for my wife is a Hudson Bay pattern. This weighs right about a pound, or maybe just a smidgen shy of a pound. It's a little bit lighter. And if you look at it, if I superimpose these two, you can see that it's basically the same axe with a cutout where the hand goes. So why would you do that? Well, one is weight savings, two is material savings. Now that one was huge way back in the day. So if you look at, Viking era and medieval axes, they're almost all a bearded pattern. It's not because that was a huge mechanical advantage in doing the work they were doing. It was a huge cost savings because steel was blasted expensive, right? It was not an advantage in terms of using the tool. It was an advantage in terms of saving money on the tool. Mm-hmm. Same reason London pattern anvils have that deep waist in them. It's all about saving money on materials. It's not about actually making a better anvil. That's a totally different discussion. We'll do an anvil video someday. Right, so that was a cost savings thing. Now, this is not as extreme a bearded pattern as the Viking era bearded patterns because, these were made in the 60s and 70s. This is a Norland. Okay, it's a very good name in axes. These were made in the 60s and 70s, and, by that point, steel is, and good steel is so inexpensive that nobody really cares about saving a couple ounces. You're saving a buck, right? If we're saving today, if we're saving a buck on a $120 tool, and the kitty is coming back again, keep an eye open. We have a kitty cat that likes to come and play with the tripod while we're filming.
So if you see a...
Just take him back to the food bowl, hon. I'm going to keep going here. We've stopped filming about 5 times already to go take him to his food bowl because he's being a little brat today. We still love him though. So saving $1 on a $120 or $150 or $200 tool is irrelevant. So we don't do it for that reason today. There is a slight advantage to having this cutout. If you're using this tool primarily as a woodworking tool, because I can choke up all the way on it, and my middle finger and the center of my hand and my control point is in the middle of the cutting blade. Okay? So that's why this axe has a small advantage for bushcraft woodworking over the Boy Scout pattern. Because here I can get my hand all the way up in, right to the center of the cutting edge, which gives a lot of control. Okay? Whereas here, the highest up, the most choked up, comfortable place on this handle is right here. This is common in American pattern handles, and I absolutely hate it. Any tool that I buy which has this shape of handle, I'm just intending to rehandle it even before I purchase it. So if there's any tool makers out there, note what I just said. I'm going to cut your handles off anyway. Please, give me an option to just buy the head by itself. You do that, I will buy more of your tools. Okay? So, I hate this. It's traditional to the American eye because American tools are based on the English tool making pattern, and it's doing this as traditional in the English tool making pattern, making your handle like this where it's straight down for a fairly long way, or has a palm swell here saying I want you to hold it there. This is more of a continental German and French style handle, and it's just it's so much more ergonomic than the annoying English pattern handles. So that's why I just intend to rehandle most of my tools. So here I can choke all the way up, and I have my hand right in the middle of the cutting edge for maximum control in woodworking. On the Scout hatchet, right, here's where it's comfortable to hold. Okay, so I'm already inches below the bottom of the cutting edge. Okay? If your intent is to use this primarily for firewood processing and campcraft, that's not a problem at all. If your intent is to do fine woodworking with it, this head and handle configuration is vastly superior to this. Okay? Now, if your primary intent is campcraft, this is superior. Okay? I'd still want to fix the handle if this was going to be my permanent, carry for a 2-week canoe trip or something, hatchet, right? I'd still do something about that. But this is a better head design for campcraft because the blade is supported by the hafting region its entire thickness, its entire width, entire height. Pick your word. Okay? On this hatchet, if I hold it here and then push in or pull out, you see how much wiggle that has? Okay? So if I deliver a strong blow to the beard, it wants to flip up. Okay? Because of that, if you're doing a lot of heavy work with a Hudson Bay pattern, it's always going to walk off the handle because you're putting a lot of blows on the lower edge of the blade, which wants to tip up the heel. Okay? So while this is a superior carving hatchet, vastly superior carving hatchet, it's also an inferior, the attributes which makes it a superior carving hatchet make it an inferior campcraft hatchet. It's a trade-off. Okay? So I really like this head. This is a really nice, lightweight wood carving tool. But I wouldn't take it as my only tool on a 2-week canoe camping trip. Now, it's great to diversify if you're going with a group, right? This is Renee's tool. I'll have my own, and I'll show you what mine is here in a minute. Just got it for a Christmas present. But this is the better wood carving tool. This would be better campcraft. So if you have 2 people going, take one of each. One person carries one person carries the other. You have both advantages. Okay? Now, there is a compromise. And this is the one that I just got. This is a Council Tool Flying Fox. And if you look at its head design, let's notice a couple things. First off, it does have a little bit of a beard, so I can choke up on it. Second off, it does have an English pattern handle, so I do intend to replace this handle. That's okay. I knew that when I put it on my Christmas list, right? As I said, American-made tools, I just intend to replace handles. I just know I'm going to hate the handles, and I'm going to replace them. I just got this. I haven't done a lot of work with it. I got it, and I file tested it, and I played with it a little bit, and I really like the design. Okay? Because it's a compromise between these two. Okay? It has a beard, but it's not as extreme as the Hudson Bay. So when I choke up on it, after I put a German handle on it, when I choke up on it, you can see my finger is within the cutting edge. Okay? So my point of control is within the cutting edge. So it will still be a very good tool for woodworking. Yet it's not as extreme. And if I do this little check that I was doing, and I just push in here, you know, I can get a little bit of a wiggle, but it's not, you know, I have to deliberately try to pick it up and turn my hand in to get it to pick up. I can't just push straight in. You know, if I push straight in, it just wants to move. So it's not going to want to walk off the haft the way a true Hudson Bay pattern will. Okay? This is a little bit beefier. The Boy Scout is 1 1/4. The Hudson Bay is right about 1 pound. This is about 1.6, 1.7 pounds. So it's just under 1 3/4 pounds. So it's got an extra ½ pound of meat. Now that gives me a bit more of a blow when I'm really trying to make something happen. Okay? And that's the perfect size for a larger bodied person. Okay? Be honest with yourself. Don't listen to this and think, oh, I can go to the gym and I can curl 50 pounds 10 times. Yes, maybe you can. But you're working a whole lot of fast twitch muscle doing that. You're not working a lot of endurance. And you just might struggle a lot more doing 500 reps in 10 minutes with a 2-pound axe than you think you would. Be honest with yourself. If you take something too heavy, it's only self-defeating. Okay? So if I'm camping with Renee and I want to do a whole bunch of really fine work, I'm still going to say, hey, hon, can I borrow your axe? Mm-hmm. Right? But I will have this on my belt for when there's something a little bit more requiring of persuasion, we will say. Right? So, you know, these two complement each other very nicely. Next thing to think about, after you think about weight and those design points, is the grind. How does this come in? We talk about patterns like this, and I say the next thing, these are all equally important, but got to get it all right. We talk about axe patterns looking at them this way, because that's the beautiful shot of the axe, but the actual beauty shot of your axe is this way. What does the grind look like? Okay. Now, if you look at this flying fox, it's very, very slender in the bit, which is really good for a chopper, right? If you're coming in and you're trying to chop through a tree with the grain running vertically, you're cutting into the grain, okay? Not splitting on end, but you're cutting into the grain. You want as slender a blade as possible to penetrate as deeply as possible with each cut, okay? That's your goal. So, you want to look for hatchets which have this very, very slender angle of entry, which is another thing I really like about this design. I'll do a more full review on this at some point, but give me a year. Give me a year to play with this, and then I'll give you a real review on it, okay? Right now, it's, what is this, the 30th? Something? Yeah, so I've had this for like 4 days since Christmas, and I haven't done anything with it other than look at it and play with it and say, ooh, I like that. Right? But give me some time and I'll do a better review of it. So the that slender angle of entry is your best cutting edge angle for chopping something down or hewing. Okay, hewing a surface if you're doing a carving job. If you're splitting, you want a much more obtuse angle of entry. So let me put these three down here for a minute. Look at some of the other things I brought out here to chat about. So this is not a hatchet. This is a pack axe, and this is one that I like to use for a splitter. But look at how much more obtuse this is. Okay, that is a splitter profile. This is a 24-inch handle, and I want another 2 inches on it. Right, 2 to 4 inches on it. In any situation where I would be packing this and be willing to carry this into the woods, I'm going to be willing to carry another 2 inches into the woods. Okay? So this is not an axe that you wear on your belt. This is an axe that you put in your canoe or your car when you're going on a longer trek. Or if you're going to do something where you're going to go in with a group and set up a base camp. Somebody carries this for a good splitter for the camp. Okay? This is also a pattern that people call a wedge beater these days, and it's a modern axe that's designed to split well and to pound wedges when using chainsaw as your primary tool for cutting down trees. So this is a modern wedge beater. Okay, but it makes a very good splitter. It's a good example of a splitting obtuse edge. Quite a lot of historic... Let me think how to phrase that. We'll edit some of this out. Mm-hmm. When you look historically, a hatchet was primarily designed to cut things down. A hatchet is a tool that you took on a hunting trip to build camp, on a trap line to cut stakes for staking traps out and building cubbies and building anchor points above the, to anchor, beaver trap through a hole in the ice, right? That was your purpose. You were cutting things to length. So pretty much all of your historic axes have that really, really fine edge angle. Now in the modern world, they also have harder steel. They have harder tempering jobs. Okay, so they hold an edge better. In the modern world, you have a couple of things that have changed. Firstly, people don't use axes the way they used to, right? Which is why most of your modern axes are designed to be splitters and wedge beaters. So yes, of course, you can still find a lot of really good felling axes out there, even from really mass market brands. And they are good felling axes. I have some, I've used a bunch of them, and they're nice, right? You can get really good felling axes. But if you go to the average, rural hardware store, you're going to find a lot more wedge beaters and mauls than good felling axes. Because that's kind of how uses has shifted. And if you look at a lot of modern hatchets that are, sold for camping, a lot of them have really obtuse edge angles. Because people are splitting firewood more than they are using it as their primary cutting tool. It's just a shift in things. This one, the Flying Fox, has avoided that trap because this is also being marketed to modern axe throwing competition people. Okay? I am never going to throw this. Don't look for a throwing axe review. I want this for a bushcraft axe. Okay? And when you're throwing and you want it to stick, that, again, if you want it to stick in a target, you want deep penetration. Okay? Whereas when you're splitting, you want maximum outward pressure and minimum penetration. You want the most force outward for the least depth that you can possibly achieve. Okay? So, it's just, people aren't using tools the way they used to, so they're being redesigned. And, Council Tool making this, trying to, sneak into that other market, allowed for a good grind as well. Okay? So, I'm very happy with the design of this. As I said, a lot of modern tools in the axe department are also softer than the older tools. It's a very, very common thing. This is that they brought the temper back pretty far on this. When I file test this, I can file sharpen this axe with very little resistance on the file. Okay. So when you're splitting and you're whaling and you're wedge beating, it's advantageous if you bend and dent faster than you break. So people are not spending years developing the skill to carefully shave and whittle with their axe. They're going out once a year, once every couple years, and using it like a club with a sharp edge. So axe companies have responded to that by drawing the temper back a lot farther. You can always retemper them. It's a thing you can do. Don't be afraid to modify your tools. Just because you bought it one way doesn't mean you have to leave it that way, right? Don't ever be afraid to modify your tools. Make sure you know what you're doing, but don't be afraid to do that, okay? So, that is a difference, and part of the reason that, fine woodworkers that want to use hand tools covet the older tools, because they were made in a different era with different expectations, okay? So when we go up past hatchet and we want something like this, that's more of a pack axe, handle length is something we need to think about. So for a true hatchet, I really don't want anything longer than about 16 inches. More than that, it's getting in the way. Now, yeah, if your fawn's foot comes out to 16, 16 and a half, 17, even 18, right? I don't care. It's not a big deal. But the section of handle I'm going to be using when I'm using a hatchet is going to be that first, 14 to 16 inches when I'm all the way out. After that, you lose control and you want a second hand on it. Okay? But once you want a second hand on it, you want a handle that's 24 to 28 inches. So there's kind of a dead zone. Longer than, 17, 18 inches and shorter than 2 feet. It's kind of a dead zone. Yes, there's tools made in that range, but I'm not a fan of that range. Even this at 24 inches, I use this. It requires a second hand to use this effectively. And when I'm all the way out here, where does my hand want to be? Right? So the end of my palm is hanging off of this at 24 inches. Okay? And then it's kind of a sharp, abrupt end to this handle. Right? So I really want more of an egg-shaped handle that would fit my palm better with my fingers catching right here. So if I look at that, right, that's about another 2 to 3 inches. Right? So 26 to 28 inches is good for a pack axe handle. And again, if I'm willing to carry a 22 or 24 inch handle, I'm also willing to carry another couple of inches on the handle. If I'm not willing to carry a 2-foot handle, I'm just taking the hatchet. Okay? So this is a good splitter pack axe. But then there's also in that same category what's often called a boy's axe. Now if you buy an American boy's axe, let me get this back out, it's pretty much going to be a 2.5 pound version of this, right? Just a little bit bigger. But there's another one that you can find. It's called a Rhineland pattern axe, and this is 2 3/4, which again, if you're 150 pound person, 2 to 2.5 pounds is where you want your pack axe. Okay. If you're 200 250 pound person and you can wield effectively and carry without fatiguing and use without fatiguing a 2 3/4 pound or even 3 pound axe, then that's really good. Okay, so this is a 1 1/4 kilogram, and we're going to European measurements here because this is a continental style. 1 1/4 kilogram pack axe head. Okay, there's a couple German companies that make this and a couple Swiss companies that make this. I don't know who made this one. I got this one on eBay, just head only. And again, I'm going to make my own handle for it. You have, again, a very slender bit. Okay, very slender bit. This is not a splitter. This is a chopper. You have a very thin eye wall. This is not a wedge beater. Okay, this is not a hammer. You do not want to use this to beat metal wedges. Can you use this to pound a wood stake into the ground? Yes. But you do not want to use this on metal. This is not designed to be a wedge beater. This is designed to be a felling axe. It's just a German pattern felling axe. What I like about this, one is 2 3/4 pound. which is nice. Again, if I'm willing to carry a 2.5 pound axe, I'm willing to carry a 2 3/4 pound axe. And look at the size of that eye. Okay? Northern Europe, you have a lot of very large eyes in their axe patterns. The reason is they don't have hickory. Okay? Here, we have an abundance, in North America, we have an abundance of really good hardwoods. And if you see the eye on this one, like, see how small that is? This is also a light head. But if you made that slender of an eye on something this size, you'd need to make it a little longer just to control the head. But you can do that with hickory. But you can't do that with birch. You can't do that with some of these second-tier hardwoods. So they traditionally make their tools with very large heads. Even if you're using hickory, this is still a very nice advantage, because with all of that contact, it's not going to walk off the head. Okay? This has, once this is handled, I can get my hand very, very close up to the cutting edge. Okay? For good control with fine work. But it's fairly symmetrical. So, if I just kind of get it balanced here, if I pull straight up on this, it doesn't move. Obviously, I can do that if I want to, but if I pull straight up, it doesn't move. And again, here, if I push straight up, it moves in a little, but not a lot. So you have a nice compromise of characteristics. This one I'm going to handle for my pack axe, and it will be 26, 27-inch handle. Okay? We'll do a video on that when I get around to it. It's the list of projects to get through is tall. So handling this is one of those. But if you're going to go in a canoe camping or car camping, or again, a group with a base camp where everybody gets to carry one heavier tool, giving one person this and one person this gives you a huge advantage in what you can accomplish with still, readily packable tools. Okay? So that's kind of the boys axe category. I don't have in my collection a traditional American pattern boys axe, because I have this, and this is going to be my boys axe pack axe item. But yeah, all of the same concepts that apply to the hatchets apply to the pack axe category. You're just scaling it up, right? And just to reiterate a little bit, like with weight for a small framed person or a very young child, you want pound or a little less than a pound. For a medium framed person, you want like a pound, pound and a quarter, and for a large framed person, pound and a half or pound and 3/4. Okay. For the pack axe, you want 2 to 2.5 for a small framed person, 2.5 to 2 3/4 for a medium to large framed person, and if you're going to get a splitter, you want to push 3 or so. Okay, this is about twice the weight of this, right? So this is 3.5, somewhere in that range. I don't know exactly. And that weight is very much an advantage for splitting, right? To carry that force down through. Now, one last category of hatchet that I want to talk about, and that's midget hatchets. So if we take a 1 pound head and then we put it on a handle that's only this long, and you can find a lot of these. They serve a purpose. Their purpose is when you want to carry a hatchet just in case, but you don't actually intend to use it. Okay? Which is not an illegitimate purpose. Okay? So where might you run into this? Well, if you're in a warm weather expedition or a warm climate that always has warm weather, and you're going through really dense brush, and your primary belt tool is going to be a machete.
Yeah, okay.
But you might need something more than a machete to help with firewood. Well, then you can get one of those midget hatchets, and you can put it in your backpack, and you'll not even really know it's there, and you can pull it out if you need it, right? It's the spare donut tire of the hatchet world. Okay? You know, you have a spare donut tire in your car for very good reasons, but you never go out in the morning intending to use your spare tire. It needs to be there, it needs to be maintained, it needs to be inflated, it needs to not have holes in it, it needs to actually be useful should you need it, but you don't intend to use it. And if you go your whole life of the car without ever using your donut, you count it as a victory, even though you've kept it and maintained it the whole time. Midget hatchets are the donut tire of the axe world. If you're purchasing a hatchet to use in bushcraft, you expect to use it on a daily basis, or you expect to use it regularly for certain projects, get something with at least a 14 to 16 inch handle. Okay? If your primary carry tool for busting jungle is a machete, but you want a hatchet just for an emergency, then yes, a 3/4 pound head on a 10 inch handle can fit nicely in your pack, barely be noticed, and is there if you need it. It's the spare tire. But don't get a spare tire hatchet that you intend to use with any regularity. Okay? Get something like this, right around a pound, with a real handle length. Okay? Even for a very small framed person, don't go smaller than this. You will have regrets. So that's the midget hatchet category. Okay, I do have a couple of them. You know that they're great for riding around in a car just in case. You know, they're great for putting in a fire kit just in case. But they're not. If you get them out and want to do a real project, you're going to be disappointed. Okay. And then before we go, that's really what I wanted to say about hatchet design. But before we go, I want to talk a little bit about hatchet materials. And I'm de-emphasizing this because in the modern world, almost all hatchets and axes are going to be made with a good steel. Because it's very, very cheap to buy very, very good steel these days. So there's no real advantage to using a garbage material. Okay? So your good steels are anything, your ideal hatchet and axe steel is anything with 60 points of carbon. Okay, so 1060 is the cheapest 60 point carbon, and it's made, a lot of axes are made of 1060. The Flying Fox, this is a 1060 hatchet. Okay, 5160 is a little bit better, it's a step up. And S7, there are a couple of companies out there that use S7 for hatchets. It would absolutely be the Cadillac of materials if the hatchet is designed right. Okay. Now you don't want a junk design made out of the Cadillac of materials. That's self-defeating. Okay. But S7 is shock-resistant tool steel. It's the same steel that we use to make jackhammer bits. So since a hatchet is an impact tool, it's a glorious material to use. It's the most expensive material to use. So most companies, even like the really high end, use 1060, 1075, or 5160. They're all good if properly heat treated. Okay, they're all equally good. The reason I do want to mention this little bit about the steels is there are a couple of, uber discount hatchets that are made out of 1040. 1040 is still a usable steel. If properly heat treated, it will hold an edge well enough for a hatchet. Okay? You do want a hatchet to be file sharpenable. It should resist a file, but it shouldn't be glass hard and skate a file. Okay? This one pretty close to does. This is as hard as I would ever want a hatchet. Okay? but it's a light hatchet intended for careful use. So that's good. It's a glorified knife. It's not a diminished felling axe. So it makes sense to have a really hard edge. I do want a somewhat softer edge on a hatchet that's going to be a beater. But 1040 is kind of pushing a little too far. If you get a 1040 hatchet, it will probably be too soft for your liking, and you just need to intend to reheat treat it. Okay, just intend to do that, and you're probably going to need to reheat treat it with a water quench. So if you're not comfortable heat treating tools with a water quench, don't buy a 1040 steel hatchet, okay? Because you're probably going to come up with something that's a bit softer than you want, doesn't hold an edge as well as you would prefer, and you're going to want to reheat treat. Now, if you water quench it and then dry your temper to straw instead of going all the way into the blue range, 1040 will still give a very good quality edge for a hatchet. But you need to know how to do what I just said. You're going to want to treat it like a knife blade because it's a lower carbon steel. So there's my thoughts on hatchets, and all of the ones that I've showed you are ones that I like. There's also a lot of others out there that are just as good. I don't have to have brand loyalty because I don't have sponsors. This is an unsponsored, unmonetized channel. If you want to support that and help keep it that way, we have a Patreon page, link in the description box. There's a lot of resources there in the Patreon store. The store has a bunch of downloadable PDFs with all kinds of information, plans and patterns, historic information, historic reprints, things like that. They're available for outright sale, but all paid Patreon tiers get all of that for free, even the $1 a month tier, which is the absolute lowest tier that Patreon will allow me to create. So, if you want to go and check out that sort of information, there's a lot of there on tanning and woodworking and traditional tools, and even back into flint axes and, Native American copper axes, right? There's just a bunch of stuff there. I hope that you'll go in and visit that. And I'm working on a bunch of other types of tools video, how to understand hand tools and understand what you're looking at and how to pick them based on your criteria, not mine, and not what some sponsor told me to say about their stuff. We already have a video like this on saws. I'll make on large crosscut saws. I'll put that link in the end screen of this video. And I'm working on more and working on building up collections so that I can teach these things well and show you lots of different variations on the theme. And, since I'm doing all of this myself, it does take resources and Patreon again. So, either way, whether you wander on Patreon or not, I hope that you will come back here and join us next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.